The rain battered Seattle streets, but inside me, a storm had been raging for a decade. I stood frozen outside the glass door of the daily grind, watching him, Ethan, move behind the counter with the same grace that had once undone me. 10 years after our breakup, I was about to walk back into his world, and my heart was already betraying me. I pushed the door open, the bell jingling like a memory I couldn't shake. The cafe smelled of roasted coffee and cinnamon, a scent that hit me like a punch, dragging me back to mornings when we'd wake up tangled in each other's arms, whispering dreams that felt invincible. Ethan looked up, and for a split second, his blue eyes locked on mine, wide with recognition, before softening into something unreadable. "Benjamin," he said, my name rolling off his tongue like it had never left. "Americano, 2 sugars, no milk, right?" His voice was steady, but his hands fumbled with a mug, betraying a flicker of nerves. I nodded, my throat tight. "You remember." "Hard to forget." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That smile used to light up my world, back when we were 20, reckless, and in love, sneaking kisses in the back of dive bars and planning a future that didn't survive past graduation. I wanted to ask why he'd walked away, why he'd left me with nothing but a note that said, "I'm sorry, Ben. I can't." But the words stayed lodged in my chest. The cafe was quiet, save for the hum of an old jazz record and the occasional clink of cups. I slid onto a stool at the counter, watching him work. Ethan had changed, his shoulders broader, his jaw sharper, but the way he moved, fluid and deliberate, was the same. He was still the man who'd stolen my heart at a college poetry slam, reading Neruda with a fire that made me believe in forever. "You own this place now?" I asked, glancing at the chalkboard menu, the exposed brick walls, the mismatched chairs that screamed Ethan. "Yeah," he said, setting my coffee down. "Opened it 3 years ago. Took a while to get here." His eyes flicked to mine, searching, maybe for forgiveness, maybe for something else. I sipped the coffee, perfect as always, and the familiarity stung. "Looks like you've done well." He leaned against the counter, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, just like before. "And you?" "Still writing." The question caught me off guard. I'd been a journalist for years, chasing stories across the country, but the novel I'd started when we were together sat unfinished in a drawer. "Some," I lied, my fingers tightening around the mug. A customer interrupted, and Ethan stepped away to serve them, leaving me with my thoughts. I'd come to Seattle for a story, not for him. But when I'd seen the cafe's name on a review site, my heart had known where I'd end up. 10 years ago, Ethan had been my everything, until he wasn't. The breakup had shattered me, leaving scars I thought had healed. Yet here I was, undone by a single look. When he returned, the cafe was empty again. "Why are you here, Ben?" he asked, his voice low, like he was afraid of the answer. "I'm working on a piece about local businesses," I said, half-truthful. "Your cafe came up." He raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "And you just happened to walk in?" I wanted to tell him the truth, that I'd never stopped thinking about him, that every relationship since had felt like a shadow of what we had. But instead, I shrugged. "Fate, maybe." He laughed, a soft, bitter sound. "You still believe in that?" "I don't know what I believe anymore," I admitted. The air between us thickened, heavy with unspoken words. I wanted to reach across the counter, to touch him, to ask why he'd left me to drown in questions. But the bell jingled again, and a group of college kids poured in, breaking the moment. As Ethan served them, I watched the way he smiled, the way he listened to their orders with a patience that hadn't been there when we were young. He'd grown, and it hurt to see it, to know I'd missed it. I finished my coffee, left a tip, and stood to leave. "Ben," he called as I reached the door. I turned, and his eyes held mine, raw and unguarded. "Come back tomorrow. I close at 8. I nodded, my heart pounding. Maybe I will. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the storm inside me was just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Ethan's voice echoed in my head, his invitation, "Come back tomorrow," a lifeline I wasn't sure I should grab. By morning, I was back at the daily grind, my resolve crumbling under the weight of memory. The cafe was busier today, filled with the hum of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. Ethan was behind the counter, his sleeves rolled up, a towel slung over his shoulder. He looked up as I entered, and his smile was warmer this time, like he'd been waiting. "Americano, 2 sugars?" he asked, already reaching for a cup. "You're gonna spoil me," I said, sliding onto the same stool. My attempt at humor felt fragile, but he laughed, and for a moment, it was like no time had passed. We fell into an easy rhythm, talking between customers. He told me about the cafe, how he'd poured everything into it after years of odd jobs. I told him about my travels, Chicago, New York, Miami, chasing stories but never quite finding home. Neither of us mentioned the past, but it hung between us, heavy and unspoken. As the day wore on, the crowd thinned, and Ethan leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You didn't come back just for a story, did you?" I swallowed, my pulse racing. "No," I admitted. "I saw your name online. I couldn't stay away." His eyes softened, but there was pain there too. "I didn't think I'd see you again, Ben." "Not after." He trailed off, and I knew he was thinking of the note, the one that had gutted me. "Why'd you leave?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, raw and desperate. "You didn't even give me a chance to fight for us." Ethan's jaw tightened, and he looked away, wiping the counter like it could erase the past. "I was scared," he said finally. "We were so young, Ben. I thought I was holding you back. You had all these dreams, writing, traveling, and I was just me." "You were enough," I said, my voice breaking. "You were everything." He met my eyes, and for a moment, the world fell away. But then a customer called, and he stepped back, the moment shattered. I stayed until closing, watching him work, memorizing the way he moved. When the last customer left, he locked the door and turned to me. "Want to help me clean up?" he asked, a playful edge to his voice. I grabbed a rag, and we worked side by side, the silence comfortable but charged. As we stacked chairs, our hands brushed, and I felt it, the spark that had always been there. He froze, his breath catching, and I knew he felt it too. "Ben," he whispered, stepping closer. I never stopped. The bell jingled, startling us. A man in his 30s, handsome and sharply dressed, walked in. "Ethan, you forgot your jacket at my place," he said, holding it up. His eyes flicked to me, curious but not unkind. Ethan's face flushed. "Thanks, Ryan," he said, taking the jacket. "This is Benjamin. Old friend." Ryan smiled, but I saw the way he looked at Ethan, possessive and familiar. My stomach twisted. "Nice to meet you," Ryan said, then left, but the air felt colder now. "You're with him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's complicated," Ethan said, avoiding my eyes. "We've been seeing each other for a few months." I nodded, the weight of it crushing me. "I should go." "Ben, wait," he started, but I was already out the door, the rain swallowing my footsteps. I didn't go back the next day, or the day after. I buried myself in work, interviewing local shop owners, but Ethan's face haunted me, his eyes, his voice, the way he'd almost said something before Ryan walked in. I told myself I was done, that I couldn't compete with a new life he'd built without me. But every night, I found myself staring at my phone, tempted to call. On the third day, I caved. The cafe was quiet, the evening light casting long shadows across the floor. Ethan was alone, wiping down tables. He looked up when I walked in, relief washing over his face. "You didn't come back," he said, setting the rag down. "Needed some time," I replied, sitting at the counter. "You and Ryan, you're happy?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "It's not what you think. Ryan's great, but," he sighed, running a hand through his hair, "he's not you." My heart stuttered, but I kept my voice steady. "Then why are you with him?" "Because it's easy," he admitted. "Safe. After you, I didn't think I could handle loving someone like that again. It hurt too much when it ended." "It didn't have to end," I said, the old wound splitting open. "You chose that for us." "I know," he said, his voice raw, "and I've regretted it every day since." The confession hung between us, heavy and fragile. I wanted to hate him, to walk away and protect myself, but I couldn't. Not when he was looking at me like that, like I was still his world. We talked for hours, the cafe empty, the world outside fading away. He told me about his life after me, years of drifting, trying to find himself. I told him about mine, chasing stories but never finding peace. We laughed about old memories, like the time we got caught in a downpour and danced in the street, soaking wet and deliriously happy. As closing time neared, he reached for my hand, his touch tentative. "I don't want you to leave again," he said. "I'm only here for a week," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Then I'm back to New York. His grip tightened. Then give me this week. I should have said no. I should have protected my heart. But I nodded, and when he pulled me into a hug, I felt whole for the first time in years. The next few days were a blur of stolen moments. Ethan and I met at the cafe after hours, talking until midnight, sharing stories and silences that felt like home. We didn't talk about Ryan, or the past, or the fact that my flight back to New York was looming. We just lived in the now, and it was enough. One night, he took me to Pike Place Market, the air crisp with autumn. We wandered through the stalls, eating fresh donuts and laughing like we were 20 again. Under the neon glow of the public market sign, he kissed me, soft and tentative, like he was afraid I'd disappear. I kissed him back, pouring 10 years of longing into it. And for a moment, the world was perfect. But reality crept in. Ryan showed up at the cafe the next day, his smile faltering when he saw us together. "You're spending a lot of time with your old friend," he said, his tone sharp. Ethan's face tightened. "Ryan, can we talk later?" Ryan's eyes flicked to me, then back to Ethan. "Sure," he said, but the hurt in his voice was unmistakable. That night, Ethan was quiet, his usual warmth dimmed. "I told Ryan we need to take a break," he said finally. "It's not fair to him, not when I'm still." "Still what?" I pressed, my heart pounding. "Still in love with you," he said, his voice breaking. "I never stopped, Ben." The words hit me like a tidal wave, washing away the walls I'd built. I pulled him close, kissing him with a desperation that scared me. But even as we lost ourselves in each other, I knew this couldn't last. I had a life in New York, a career I'd fought for. And Ethan had his cafe, his world here. The next day, a call from my editor pulled me back to reality. The story was due, and they needed me back early. I told Ethan that night, and his face fell. "Stay," he said, his voice barely audible. "We can make this work." "I can't," I said, hating the words. "Not yet." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "Then let's make this week count." We did. Every moment felt like a gift. Every touch, every laugh, every quiet night in his apartment above the cafe. But as my departure loomed, the weight of it grew heavier. The night before my flight, Ethan closed the cafe early. We sat on the floor, surrounded by fairy lights he'd strung up, sharing a bottle of wine. The air was thick with things we didn't want to say. "I thought I could do this," he said, staring at the floor. "Let you go again. But I can't." I reached for his hand, my heart aching. "I don't want to lose you either. But my life's in New York. Yours is here." "It doesn't have to be," he said, his eyes fierce. "I could sell the cafe. Come with you." The offer stunned me. "Ethan, this place is your dream." "You're my dream," he said, his voice raw. "You always were." I wanted to say yes, to believe we could rewrite the past. But doubt crept in. What if we crashed again? What if love wasn't enough? We made love that night, slow and desperate, like we could hold on to time itself. Afterward, lying in his arms, I traced the lines of his face, memorizing every detail. "I need time," I whispered, "to figure this out." He nodded, but the sadness in his eyes broke me. The next morning, I packed my bags, my heart heavy. Ethan drove me to the airport, the silence between us deafening. At the gate, he pulled me into a hug, his voice shaking. "I'll wait for you, Ben, however long it takes." I kissed him, tears burning my eyes. "I'll come back," I promised, not sure if I was lying. As I boarded the plane, I looked back one last time, his figure small in the distance. The ache in my chest told me this wasn't the end, but it wasn't a beginning either. Back in New York, the city felt colder, emptier. I threw myself into work, but every story I wrote felt hollow. Ethan's words echoed in my mind. "I'll wait for you." And I wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Months passed. I started my novel again, pouring my heart into it, writing about love and loss and second chances. Every word was for him. I sent him drafts, and he sent back notes, his handwriting as familiar as his voice. We talked on the phone, late-night calls that stretched into dawn, rebuilding what we'd lost. One day, a package arrived from Seattle. Inside was a coffee mug from the Daily Grind and a note. "Americano, 2 sugars, no milk. Always." I laughed through tears, knowing what I had to do. I booked a flight. When I walked into the cafe, Ethan was there, his eyes lighting up like they had 10 years ago. "You came back," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I had to. I said, stepping closer. I love you, Ethan. I always have. He pulled me into his arms, and the world fell away. We kissed, and it was like coming home. The cafe was still his, but he'd hired a manager, giving him freedom to travel, to build a life with me. I'd taken a job that let me work remotely, splitting time between New York and Seattle. We weren't the boys we'd been at 20. We'd hurt each other, grown apart, and found our way back. But love, I learned, wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when it hurt, even when it scared you. As we stood in the cafe, surrounded by the scent of coffee and the promise of tomorrow, I knew we'd write our own ending, one worth waiting 10 years for.